So you may be asking yourself, how can SQL help us identify more funding opportunities for Zandra's art residency? Well, guess what? That's exactly what I am going to cover in this tutorial. Peace, guys. I am Money Mike 404. I am a professional consultant in technology, business, and marketing. And right now, Limit Squeeze Marketing has just launched its new funding procurement services. And its client, Zandra Solomon, is pursuing an art residency in Mexico. And she has a goal of raising between 9,000 and 15,000 in funding for her art residency program. And I know for all my data nerds, yes, the answer is yes. Yes, yes, yes. SQL can actually help us identify more opportunities for Zandra. Okay, so let's take a step back and let me show you guys what we're going to do in this exercise. So by the end of this exercise or by the end of this tutorial, you guys will have created this query. And this query essentially is going to identify the funding opportunities that our participants are eligible for. All right. So this nice little query right here, that's what you guys are going to be able to build by the end of this tutorial, and it's going to make perfect sense to you guys. All right. But before we get into any SQL, this is something I always make my students do. I always make them take a step back and draw a picture. Understand what you are trying to do conceptually first before you start doing any coding. And it'll help you when you need to code. All right. So let's take a step back and just like conceptualize what we're trying to accomplish here. All right. So what we're trying to accomplish is the fundamental query that this like app kind of is built on, right? And it's basically its efficient ability to identify the funds that a particular participant is eligible for. So how does that happen? All right. So I'm not gonna go all into the interwebs of our database design. Here's the ER diagram. If you guys want to get a copy of the ER diagram, all you guys have to do is comment below and you guys can get a copy of you guys can get access to this whiteboard and this ER diagram. All right. But here are the tables that I am going to highlight. All right. So yours truly designed a database. And essentially, what we're trying to do is match, right? We're trying to find an efficient way to be able to match funds and eligible participants. Now, how does this magic happen? All right, let's take a look, see at our core tables here. All right, so we do have a fund table and we do have a participant table. All right, so these are not necessarily directly like related, but what we're trying to do is match our participants to the funds that they're eligible for. And the tables that's actually going to help us do that are these three tables. Now, the table that links a fund eligibility rule, because that's basically how we yeah, so we need a way to like define like, okay, what makes a participant eligible for a particular fund? So in addition to having a fund table, we have a fund eld rule table. So essentially, these are the eligibility rules to qualify or be eligible for this fund. All right. So, and we also have a participant class table. All right. These are going to be all the different classes that a participant falls into. And what's gelling everything together is this table called a fund elge class cat. All right. So essentially, right? Let me give you guys a real example. That might actually help conceptualize this. All right. So over here in our little boxes, we have our different funds that we've identified, right? So these are actually real funds that we've identified for Zandra. All right. So this would be on our fund table down here. All right. Now let's just go through some of the eligibility. Okay, let's see what is required to qualify for the AM Vet scholarship. All right. Now, I actually have on a spreadsheet like what it says. Let me see if I put that in the fun table or not. Okay. So Essentially, to be eligible for this scholarship, you need to be a veteran military you need to be you need to have a veteran military status and you need to be pursuing a academic. You need to be like basically enrolled in a undergrad or grad program, an accredited college. All right. Those are the two eligibility rules. All right. So how did we represent that in the database? All right. So the basically the power in all of this again is this fun elg cat table. All right. And our participant class and our eligibility rules both have this column. And this column tells us which eligibility category a something's referring to, right? So, for example, we said that for the AMVPT, one of the rules is that you need to have a military status of veteran. All right. So this is how we represent this on the database. So on the fun rule table, we added a record. All right. This fun else rule ID is just a unique identifier for each record in the database. All right. So we have the fun that we're referring to right now that we're adding a rule tool is the AM Vets Military. All right. That particular fun. All right. So that's why that is fun number one. And if we scroll down, we'll see fun number one is the AM Vets National Scholarship. Okay. So we are loading a rule right now that is related to the military enrollment status. So we want to make sure we select the FECCID of 2. All right. So that's rule number one. But this fund has two rules. All right. The second rule is you must be an active student. All right. Now, our fund ELG cat category for academic enrollment status is 10. So we want to have the FECC ID of 10, right? To have the value. Now, let me explain this. So this one has a value of undergrad, oh, sorry, enrolled, undergrad, and grad. Now, why would I have that there, right? So our participants can have any of these three, and it's still going to get returned as a match case in our query, and I'll show you guys how in a second. All right. So what we will want to check, right, for fund number one that has these two rules. Let's suppose that we have 13 participants, but right now let's just focus on Zandra. So this is participant one. All right. So Zandra would have gone through our onboarding process and she would have loaded different information about herself. So if we go over to our ER diagram, we have things like the participant background information, the participant funding goals, the participant education background, the participant special awards. We would have taken all of that information and then this would get converted to different classes that this participant falls under. All right. So let's just go through the classes that Z falls under, how she is eligible for certain funds, how she's not eligible for certain funds. Finally, we'll go through that query. All right. Hope you guys are excited about SQL right now. SQL is about to really save us some time from a lot of manual labor. All right. So firstly, let's go through Zandra's first category or FECC status. So her first FECC status is for the professional occupation. So Zandra has an occupation of artist, and she also has a second occupational status of influencer. We'll revisit that in the future at a different point. All right. She has a military enrollment status of veteran. She has a military branch identifier as Navy. We'll definitely see how that plays a part in one of the funds. She has a military combat status of combat. She has a disability status of 100%. She has an ethnicity category of Black. She has a gender identity of woman. She has oh, this is not shown on the she has an orientation identity category of LGBTQIA. She has a handedness category of left-handed. She has an academic enrollment status of undergrad. She has a leadership status of leader, and she has a career specific status as artist. All right, so we would have gathered all this information by onboarding Zandra. We take all of that different information and we categorize the different things so that we can find different funds that she's eligible for. Now, these categories are what we're going to match to our funds. All right. So remember our fund eligibility table. Let's go back through this now. All right. So AM Vets National Scholarship. So this one has two eligibility requirements: military enrollment status and academic enrollment status. So let's just see pictorially if Zandra would qualify for this. So I color coded these so you could easily be able to find this. So boom, we have our military, make sure, yeah, boom, we have our military enrollment status. Okay, we know she at least has a category related to that rule, so we'll at least evaluate whether she qualifies or not. And then also, we have an academic enrollment status, right? And so those are the two categories that our participant needs to have for us to evaluate the values that they have to see if they're eligible for that fund. Okay, so let's look a little bit deeper into the values that Zandra has. Now, all right, so firstly, the first check is does the participant even have the classifications required for this fund? So boom, Zandra has the two classifications required to even evaluate if you're eligible for this fund. All right. So now for the military status, you guys can't see this, but the military status requirement is actually better. All right. So let's look at Sandra's military status. It is veteran. So boom, Zandra so far qualifies for this fund. All right. Let's go to the next one. So for academic enrollment, this one is it could take anything like undergrad, grad, um, postdoctoral, and trade or tech. And we see that Zandra has a status of undergrad. So in this scenario, Zandra should be returned. Like this fund should be returned if we're looking for eligible funds that Zandra qualifies for. All right, let's move on. So a second fund that we identified for Zandra is called a VFW Sport Clips Help a Hero Fund. All right. So this fund actually has the exact same qualifications as the AM Vets National Scholarship. So I'm not going to go into great detail with that one. So this would be another fund that the query should return to say that Zandra is eligible for. All right. Let's go to another fund. All right. The Pat Tillman Foundation Scholarship, another scholarship we found for her. All right. So this one also requires a military status, and I believe for this one might be. Let me not guess. I can just go right here. So for the Pat Tillman, okay, so active or veteran. All right, so this is definitely a scenario where we'll see in the query where it says find set value, the fact that we have both active and veteran, and that fact that Zandra has veteran, that it'll the query will say like yes, she actually qualifies and she meets that eligibility status. All right. The next one is leadership. So this fund wants to see that you've exhibited leadership. So let's look and see. So Zandra actually does have a classification for leadership, and hers is leader. So our query should also return the Pat Tillman Foundation Scholarship as a scholarship that Zandra is eligible for. Are you guys getting this? I really think that you guys need to like practice with these assets. So if you want to get access to this whiteboard, all you need to do is comment below and I'll make sure that you guys get access. Moving on. All right. Let's go to the Wells Fargo Veteran Scholarship. All right. So for this one has the exact same qualifications as the AM Vet. So let's look into the Army Women's Foundation Legacy Scholarship. All right. So this is actually one that Zandra does not qualify for. All right. And let's find out why she does not. All right. So let's actually go to our rules table. All right. And we're going to look for the Army vet. All right. Let's look at its qualifications. All right. So firstly, it has a number 7 category. So one, the gender needs to be woman. So let's see if Zandra has a category of 7 and if her thing is woman. Okay, boom. Check off one. So far, she's eligible for the scholarship. Let's move on to the next one. All right. And we also see that here. All right. So the next rule that we have is that category number 2, which is our military enrollment status. All right. So for category number 2, the acceptable values are um active, veteran, and lineage. So for this particular scholarship, not only can you have an active or veteran status, but also if like you're a descendant of a veteran, then you also qualify. So for this one, could also have a lineage. So if we had a participant in our database who had the lineage as their military status, they would check off on this eligibility. All right. So far, boom, check. Zandra still qualifies for this fund. And we also see that here as military status. All right. Let's move on to our next eligibility rule. And for the next one, we have a 3 category, and our 3 category is military branch. See, if you're watching this is the reason why I asked you if your mom or grandma was in the army. All right. So one of the rules for this fund is that you need to be in the military or be a descendant, sorry, in the army specifically. So you notice how the other scholarships were just in general the military. This one is specific by branch. All right. So Z was actually in the Navy, not the Army, and her grandmother was in the army, or her grandfather was in the army, not her grandmother. And I believe we need specifically her grandmother or mother to have been in the army. So Zandra does have a category number 3 for our military branch. But if we look at Zandra's military branch, we'll see that she's Navy. All right. So that is the rule right now that makes Zandra not qualified for this particular fund. So this fund should not get returned as far as the funds that Zandra's. All right. And we see military branch, the FECCID category of 3, which is military branch. The requirement is Army. All right. And we have one more rule for that particular fund. And we have an enrollment group, right? So and category number 10. So for category number 10, it is the academic enrollment status. And as we can see, for our academic enrollment status, you can be enroll, undergrad, grad, all that good stuff. And we see that Zandra would actually qualify. So the thing that would make her disqualified for that particular fund is the fact that it is a military branch. All right. So in the next video, I'm actually going to show you guys the database. Oh, actually, before I end this, let me show you guys the query. And the next video, we'll run subquery by subquery, and we'll actually load some new rules for our other funds that we found for Zandra. So these are real funds that we found for Zandra, real rules we need to load to our database, so that we can identify the opportunities to go after for Zandra. All right, let me just show you guys a preview of the query. All right, so here's our gorgeous query that will pull our eligible participants. Now, when it comes to subqueries, my recommendation is to actually read the last select statement last, because that is typically pulling from all the other subqueries. So I think a great place to start will be right here. So it's saying from participants. All right, so this is showing all the participants in our database. All right, it's going to join on the participant class. Now, if you just see join, it is going to be an integer join. Integer join means so Only if a participant has values loaded to the participant class table will these participants be returned because it's an inner join. So they need to be on both tables. All right. And we are joining on the participant ID. So we have this participant table, and I don't think we have participant class on here. Actually, we do. Okay, boom. So we have this participant table and we are joining to our participant class table. And the reason why we're doing that is because now we're pulling all the different classes that a participant has so that we can identify the potential funding opportunities that they might be eligible for. All right, so that's all we've done so far. Now we are joining the fund eligibility rule. Okay, so now we're joining this table and we're joining it on our FECC ID this, right? So this is also an inner join. That means only the classifications that this participant falls under, right? Those are going to be the only fund eligibility rule records that we should see. Only ones that they have in common, right? So Zandra having 1 through 12 means that only 1 through 12, or we only have 1 through 12, but only 1 through 12 um funds that have that particular rule are going to show up, right? So, moving on, that's how we're joining that. Yeah, so that's what we're doing. So now we're joining, right? So now we know for each one of the categories that Zandra falls under, what the eligibility rule is. Now, let's go to this part that I talked about before as far as this find in set function. Now, this is really the key. I'm so glad that I was just able to describe what I was doing, and ChatGPT actually gave me the function. I knew for sure that I wanted to look at the value that the participant had for that category, and then look at the fund eligibility rules value and evaluate if those things are compatible. At first, we had like the percent sign, kind of like seeing if that value is anywhere like in it, like kind of like, but almost checking like how you would check if something's in the string. So then I found this beautiful function and it's called find and set, and it works magnificently. Also before I didn't have commas, these were like hyphenated because I figured I could just check to see if a particular word was in that whole word. But I saw that best practice is actually to use commas. And now I can just evaluate whether a particular value is in the set, that comma separated set of what we're looking at. Okay, so now let's look at this query and how powerful it is that line. Okay, so we're joining our fund eligibility rule, right? From that participant class, we're joining the fund eligibility rule. But we're only returning records where the participant class, so that value, so let's go back over here, right? So our participant class value, for example, like for example, how this FECC ID is 2, and how for our fund, this AMVET FECC ID is 2, how this one is 2 and this one is 2, right? And now it's saying look at the PC dot value. So this is saying look at the value that this participant has. So in this case, we're looking at veteran, right? And then it's saying to find in set, right? So now it's saying to look at the set. So look at our fund eligibility. So this table, and now we're looking at its values. All right. Now in this case, it only has veteran. But let's look at another example. So um that's what this in find in set means. And another example would be, for example, our women's army. No. Okay, so our VFW student active enrollment rule. So sorry, our VFW student fund, you can have a status of enrolled, undergrad, grad, and grad, right? So you have a category of 10, right? And let's look at Zandra. So Zandra has a category of 10 and she has a value of undergrad. This query is going to look at Zandra's undergrad value and say, hey, is undergrad up in this list of enrolled undergrad and grad? And if so, that means that this is going to evaluate to greater than zero. All right. Uh, okay. So that's what this is the powerfulness of like the query. So at this time, we're joining funds, right? That the participants eligible for. Let's go on to the next part of the query. So now we're joining, right? So we have select the fund ID, and then we're counting, and then we have the fund eligible. Essentially, what we're doing is going to our fund eligible table and we're counting how many rules are on are how many rules each fund ID has, right? And so it's basically say, okay, and let me show you why. Because if we go down here, so that little star is gonna say like, okay, how many times did this appear? And we're counting the fund ID because we see down here it has fund ID and that's what we provide the fund ID and the fund eligible ID rule. Okay, so it's going to, for example, return two for the fund ID of one. And these records are going to repeat themselves because this is also being grouped by the fund eligible rule ID. All right. I'll explain why you would want those records to repeat itself in a second. All right. So this is counting the total number of rules each fund has. All right. And we're calling that subquery our total. All right. And we're able to join the query that we just subquery we were just building, the one that has the participant class information. We're joining all of that information to this like total one that has the total number of rules each fund has. We're joining that on the fund ID. All right. And then we're grouping this by the participant ID and the fund ID because at the end of the day, that's what we're evaluating. All right. And then we're ordering it by the participant ID and the match percentage. All right. So if I have you hooked in the next video, I'm going to actually show you guys the results. You guys will see this compiled in the MySQL server in the cloud. And if you guys want to get a link to that SQL I guess sandbox, all you have to do is comment below. All right. And if you guys want to get a link to this whiteboard so that you guys can follow along and be able to like do these exercises with us, guess what you need to do? Just comment below and I got you. And make sure you guys enroll in our data science bootcamp, guys. As you guys can see, this is a way, right, for us to more efficiently be able to identify all the different funding opportunities that Zandra is eligible for. So all we have to do is load Zandra's categories one time. And then every time we add a new fund to our database, and when we add a fund to our database and we add the rules, automatically we're going to be able to identify more funding opportunities that Zandra is eligible for. All right. So in the next data science video, I am actually going to show you guys the query compiled in MySQL server. You guys can see the results. And on my marketing side of things for Lemon Squeeze Marketing, I'm going to show you guys how we actually begin constructing the application part to apply for the grant opportunities. All right. So I hope I have roped you in. Make sure you guys join my data science bootcamp or my digital marketing bootcamp. I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. All right.